It's time for College Sports Weekly with Don Macholis and Dan Underberg on the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network.
All right, welcome in. College Sports Weekly on a Saturday morning. Don Macholis, along with the professor, Dan Underberg, Charlie Usen on the ones and twos. Over the next 2 hours, the transfer report. People are, professor, are like, so what do you talk about now? Football's done. Basketball's done. And college sports, to me, with the whole NIL and transfer portal, is a lot like the NFL. The NFL is what? Relevant 12 months a year when you include the schedule, and then all of a sudden it's free agency and the draft and mini camp, and every month there's something going on in the NFL. I feel like college sports is kind of morphed into that now with the transfer portal and the NIL, because we're constantly having to deal with this shift as far as the roster goes.
Wow. It's like, get the button ready, Charlie.
Sorry, I did not mean to scare you for a second. So there's a ton to get to, especially now with the transfer portal going into week 2. So we've got one left as everybody's trying to rebuild their roster. Coming up in just a second, Ben Steele, Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, is slated to join us. Ben has, I think we can say, been friend of show and been our Marquette insider for quite some time. And Marquette made some news this week, again, by entering the transfer portal for the first time in 4 years. So we'll talk to Ben in just a moment. We'll get to some headlines. And then we're going to look later on in hour 2 what it takes financially these days to build a roster in college athletics, because Daniel, it's getting crazy expensive and the numbers keep escalating instead of going, I'll say, even flattening out, right? It just seems like every time you open up the computer, all of a sudden somebody's making a prediction about where this thing is going, and how you keep up, I don't know. But also, after we get done talking with Ben, the big story of the week that we'll get to is Chris McIntosh being outed, I'll say it that way, at Wisconsin. I know he left voluntarily, but there's varying stories with that. So we'll talk about the whole Wisconsin setup as we get into segment 2. But first, how about we get to the Nicolay Law talk and text line and bring in our guy. There he is. There's Benjamin. Now joins us. Ben, how you doing, bud?
What's up, guys? I missed your handsome faces. I haven't seen you guys in a while.
Yeah, it's been a hot minute. It's been a hot minute, but we're so glad that you're able to join us here this morning. And Ben, for the first time, as I was saying, in about 4 years, Marquette has dabbled into the transfer portal and actually gotten themselves one of the key pieces, I think, for the team, but a prized piece as far as the transfer portal goes.
Yeah, Shaka Smart was like one of the last holdouts against bringing in transfers. He was, but he couldn't resist the changing tides in college sports, like you guys were talking about. But this was a huge get for Marquette. This was exactly the kind of player they needed. Big man, Louisville's Sanando Fru. He's a German guy. He only played 1 year of college basketball last year, but don't let that fool you. He was a pro in Germany before that. This is the changing landscape of college sports now. These foreign guys are professionals. It's a different system over there. But this is a big guy. He's exactly what Marquette needed. Huge physical presence down low. Good offensive rebounder. Good screen setter. Can finish at the rim, which is where Marquette struggled a lot last year. He fills a lot of weaknesses for this Marquette team, and Marquette retained a lot of its good pieces. This just complements them. This is the new way that Shaka Smart is going to build out rosters now at Marquette.
So I'm curious, were you surprised when you found out that that he was from Louisville? And I guess what I'm saying is, a lot of times when you see something happen in the transfer portal and you found out your favorite team, whatever that is, gets a pickup, there's always a little bit of a shock when it comes from a nearby school or sometimes within a conference, stuff like that. You know, Louisville's ACC and all that. But I guess I was surprised at the stature of this person that came in.
Yeah.
And, when Marquette gets its hands into the portal for the first time, but were you surprised of the quality of the recruit that came in?
No, like I said, this was the piece that Marquette needed. They needed a big man, and they were going to go after the best that they could get. And after a 12-20 season at Marquette, there's an appetite amongst the fans, the donors, to make a big splash. So they were going to go after the biggest names they could. So that's what they did with Sananda Frew, and things were always shifting. Louisville brought in the big man from Kansas, so that made this guy available. It's just that's the way it is now. That in this chaotic free agency world that you guys talked about in the opening there. If it's good for college basketball, that's a whole other show. We can talk about it for hours and hours. But it is, like you said, that we wouldn't be talking about Marquette basketball in the middle of April if this didn't happen.
Are you thinking that Marquette's going to make another entry into the portal this year? What are you hearing?
Yes, I mean you might get another name probably today.
Okay.
Or at least by the end of the weekend. It's a name of local interest. I will say that.
Look at Ben,
I can't mention the name specifically.
Around it.
I can't name the name specifically because the deal's not finished yet. So you can always, these things can always blow up at the last second. So if you go on social media, you can figure it out pretty quickly. But it's a name that it's not a big splashy name, but I think it's actually a player that would help Marquette as just kind of a depth piece that really would fit the roster pretty perfectly.
Okay.
And so after that, they'll have one more spot remaining. I don't know if they'll fill it. They're looking at a lot of different names. They're going to try after. They're going to go after probably a guard just to fill out depth pieces. But with Marquette's situation, they had good young players and Nigel James and Adrian Stevens in the backcourt. There's not a lot of playing time. Like people in the transfer portal looking for, a lot of minutes of starting spots. I don't know if Marquette can offer that, but they're definitely going to look to add, finish off all 15 pieces of the roster. I don't know if they will or not, but after they fill these first two, there's another spot hanging out there.
Ben, I had commended, I guess, in my heart what Shaka was trying to do and staying old school about, we go into these homes, we recruit, we talk about development. I want to stay true to that. But obviously the landscape, as you alluded to, has changed so much in college athletics that your hand gets forced. Was there any specific moment that you think the world changed for Shaka as far as his view goes with recruiting and development, or was it just the culmination of what the entire season was in the fact that, I've got to jump into this thing much like everybody else has done?
Yeah, it was the middle of the season. Obviously, things didn't go very well this year, and I think even still, if Shaka had his way, he would still stick with the roster and build it year after year with his own people, his own recruits that he brings in. It just sometimes you get caught like he did this year. The biggest issues for Marquette this year was the upperclassmen. Those players didn't quite develop like the staff had thought they were going to, which in this day and age, you can, if you have some recruiting misses, like everyone has recruiting misses, but in this day and age, you can replace them pretty quickly in the transfer portal. The Marquette coaches thought they could develop these guys, and it didn't work out. That's another 2-hour show we could talk about. It just didn't work out. And so now he kind of realized at the middle of the season, we need a significant talent upgrade if we're going to compete. We can't have these 12-20 seasons anymore. Or let's be honest, you have another 12-20 season, it's not going to reflect well on the coaching staff next season. So they had to upgrade the talent this year. I think still the core of Marquette's development is going to be there. They have these good young pieces that they kept around, which is, commendable in this day and age that Marquette kept the 5 players that they really wanted from last season's roster. They're just going to supplement those pieces now. But the core pieces are going to be there all 4 years, I think.
So now you look into the 26-27 season, you've got those core pieces that you were mentioning. You've got Fruit coming in to do that. I have been of the mind that now, whether it's basketball or football, it's much more difficult to predict outcomes because of all the change in every we get our blinders on and we're looking specifically at Marquette or Wisconsin, whatever it is. We're forgetting about how all the other teams are changing too, in any of the conferences, that losing good guys, picking up good guys. Where do you, it's an unfair question, Ben, but where do you kind of see Marquette landing? Because I don't think anybody is going to be accepting of a 12-20 season anymore.
No. I didn't think this Marquette roster was that far away after the season with how all the young players performed at the end of last season. They just needed to fill those holes, especially that big man hole, which they did. So I think they'll be competitive, super competitive next year. What that means, again, we have to wait for the next couple of weeks to see how the other Big East rosters shake out. But I think Marquette will be competing for an NCAA tournament bid next season, which, after a 12-20 season, that's got to happen. And I think that's going to be the case. Just how the young players performed last season, plus the pieces that they're adding, I think the roster is going to be very super competitive for Marquette next season.
Ben, was there any surprise in the fact that Sean Jones, Trey Norman decided to enter the transfer portal, or was that just something that you kind of felt in following the team and being around the team that it was something that was going to take place once the window began to open?
Yeah, I think that was expected for several months. For those guys, look, both those guys just needed a different landing spot. Things just hadn't worked out for different reasons. For Sean's, he was hit by the injury bug for 4 years, of especially a very significant knee injury. And as a 5'10" guard, it kind of sapped his athleticism a little bit. So he needed to go someplace, a lower level. He went to Toledo, back home in Ohio. I think that's more, he just needed to play, and it wasn't going to happen here at Marquette. And Trey Norman the same way. His offensive game just didn't develop. He was one of those upperclassmen whose game is just stalled out development-wise. He wasn't able to compete offensively at the Big East level. He hasn't found a landing spot last year. He hasn't found a landing spot for him, but I think he'll end up in the same kind of position at a mid-major school where he'll be able to play a little more, and he needed playing time to develop. He wasn't good enough to get the playing time at Marquette, so he needs to go somewhere where he can play for his last couple years in college. So that wasn't a surprise.
It's when you look at that route, guys are looking for that opportunity for playing time. When you look at Marquette's bench and you're thinking of playing time, and I think we can pretty much identify, who that starting 5 to 6 is going to be, but how deep do you think Shaka Smart can go into his bench next year? Can he go to 8? Can he get to 9? What are you thinking?
Yeah, and this is another thing about Marquette that's unique, is they had 3 guys redshirt last year, which is unheard of in this day and age. Redshirting guys who aren't hurt, just for development reasons. And I think all 3 of those guys, like a big man, Sheik Pearson, you got a 6'7" forward, and Ian Miletich, and a 6'4" shooter, Australian guy, Nash Walker. I think all those guys are going to be factors in the rotation. Those 3 guys plus this unnamed player that you guys will figure out in the next couple of days. And they got a really good freshman coming in, Alex Ebuonu, who looks to have the physicality, have the Big East ready body already at a young age. He might factor in the rotation. So, you got a lot of options there. I think the depth will be there for sure. That's why I'm bullish on the roster for next year, even after a bad season such as this one.
Ben, with the fact that Marquette went out and got a center to help fill that roster spot, I think it's been amazing to me this season and now going into next, how college teams now are valuing the 5 spot. I think we kind of got away from it a little bit. It was always the big wing, the shooter, somebody from the perimeter. But then based on what Illinois, Michigan, Arizona, you can go right down the line, what they were able to do in developing that front wall in front of the rim in the 5-spot position. It just seems like now the value for centers has escalated as far as the market goes and the transfer portal.
Yeah, definitely. Michigan won the national championship the year with one of the largest front lines in college basketball history. And I think everything's like a reaction to that. You need to play against those kind of teams, so you need to reinforce your front line. I mean, it's a lot of different things. Like, there's not as good shooting in college basketball. Everything, you want to get closer to the basket. So you want to get a good big guys so you can defend against those players, and you also want to score close to the basket. But I think, the market's crazy. The numbers that you read, you talked about opening your computer and being shocked by the numbers. It's just hard to verify these things. That's one of the craziest things about the transfer portal, is that all these numbers, you don't know if the agents are just throwing those out there just to inflate the market. Teams don't know what's real and what's not, so they have to overpay, and then it's just it's crazy. It's just, there has to be some kind of regulation for that.
Let's talk. I'm gonna flip gears on you a little bit, Ben. I'm curious about you reporting over the course of the last 5 years. There was a time when you knew you had a pretty established roster. Well, even with Marquette, it's been much sooner than that, in the last 2 to 3 years. And now suddenly you are, as a reporter, you're following on everything financial. You're following on what is effectively free agency. You're trying to report on that. How has your life covering the team, being on the Marquette beat, changed over the course, let's say, the last 2 years?
Yeah, it's a lot different. I think the biggest thing is the introduction of agents into the college basketball space. They're advocating on behalf of their players, which that's their job.
Right.
But the accuracy of their information is, it's hard to get a gauge on. It's hard, but I used to just have to rely on, what coaches are telling me, but now I have to get all these different sides, or what players' families too are thrown into the equation too. It's dramatically different nowadays.
Ben, it's good to have you back.
It is good to have you back.
Good to have Ben
Thanks for
Steele
calling us.
back
Good
in the
looking.
fold. Have yourself a great Saturday. Appreciate it. I know you've got family, business, you name it, everything happening on a Saturday, and love the fact that you carved out a couple of minutes to join us. Appreciate you, bud.
All right, look for that unnamed player. Log on to the Journal Sentinel and look for a story that should be popping up in the next few days.
You got it, sir. Absolutely. Ben Steele from the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, our Marquette basketball insider, joining us on the Nicolay Law Talk and text line. Ben has always been so gracious with his time for us. And now with the fact, again, that Marquette decided to jump in the transfer portal, I could think of no better person to have come on our show. And I know he's crazy busy, with his life on a Saturday. So I definitely appreciate Ben jumping on and being with us.
Yeah, I think too. I think he's going to have probably a more fun professional year next year.
Yes.
Then I think it's got to be very difficult to kind of slog through that, 12 and 20 season. But at the same time, there were some bright spots that he did get to cover, and move forward. And he's right. They've got a core of 5 players that should allow them, with the addition of Frew, to be really competitive. And I think it's going to be a lot more fun for us to cover, for us to watch. And I think Marquette alumni are going to have a lot more fun at these games coming up in 2026, 27.
Boy, Frew at the 5 spot, Nigel James Jr.
Yep.
Running the point guard.
What do you do?
Absolutely. I think this Marquette team is going to be, as you just said, fun to cover next season once college basketball gets up and running. We're going to take a break. On the other side of the break, we had breaking news, which is now 6 days old. That's the beauty of going on once a week. Breaking news is 6 days old. But Chris McIntosh resigning as the AD in Madison. Dan, Charlie will cover it next. It's College Sports Weekly, live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios. As always, we are powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook. All right, welcome back in. It's College Sports Weekly, live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios. We are powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook. Don't forget, you can check in on the show. You can find us at the Nicolay Law Talk and text line 414-677-1250, on socials at Wisconsin Sports Radio. Our thanks to our friends up in Green Bay at 99.7 FM and 1440 AM. In Wausau, 93.9 The Game. Obviously here in Milwaukee, 1250 AM, 105.7 FM The Fan, and in Duluth Superior at 710 The Game. Happy Saturday morning to everyone. Glad that you're taking a few minutes to join us again on College Sports Weekly. And guys, we had breaking news again. When it's a weekly show, we can still call it breaking news because it happened after we were on the air last week. But Chris McIntosh decides to take a job with the Big Ten, step down as athletic director. Professor,
Yes.
Initial reaction.
My reaction is probably contrarian to what a lot of people have had on this one. I've read a lot where it feels like the theme is, how could you? You've got to stick this out. You've got to do these things. His tenure has generally been a failure, blah, 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 blah. Okay. I don't have that perspective. I really don't. If you take away football, where has he failed? They're developing the new facility that they need. And you don't blame him for what Badger basketball can't do in March and April. That's not his fault.
Mm-hmm.
He gets hired on the day NIL is effectively approved. He's got nobody I don't think anybody in the hockey program is upset with what Chris McIntosh is doing. I don't think anybody in women's volleyball is upset with it. And I know there's a lot of things. And my issue with Chris always goes back to that letter he sent last fall to the fans, which I think was just tone deaf and doing that. But I don't think he's going to be judged based on the engine of the athletic department, and that's football team. Right.
Yeah.
And I think somewhere in there, life would have been so much better had we just, hired the other guy. Right. Mm-hmm. And done that. Well, we don't know. And it may not have changed. We know that the cupboard was pretty bare when Luke Fickell came in, and we weren't really aware of that. We could see it, but we didn't want to look at it. And, I think Chris McIntosh has been forced to react to some bad football decisions. Mm-hmm. And the other thing, and I'll end, because trust me, I could go on and on and on and on. At some point, if you can get a better job, take the better job. And I think where he's going now, he does not have to deal with the day-to-day NIL portal, those types of things. And all the low key to upfront hate for Chris McIntosh, I think, is misplaced. And I think it's a little self-righteous. So
Charlie, I will say this, because I want to jump on the better job in just a second. Mm-hmm. But to Dan's point, I think, as we talked yesterday with Sparky, you had Chris McIntosh being developed and trained under Barry Alvarez in what is now an antiquated system.
Right.
And so you come into the position, you've been groomed, you've been trained. This is how it works. This is how we do things. And as soon as you step through the door, the whole playing field is altered. And it just seemed as if the Badgers were behind the eight ball, so to speak, for quite some time. I think this year they're starting to catch up. Most publications consider the Badgers to be a top 25, if not top 30, as far as recruitment goes in the NIL and the transfer portal. But we lag behind. And I don't know how much fault I want to put on a Chris McIntosh because of the fact you were groomed in an antiquated now system, and you had to learn on the fly, where some of these others ADs have stepped in. And don't give me an AD from the SEC. They've just been doing this under the table. They knew exactly what was going on. It just wasn't legal. Now it's legal, and they're just much more open with it.
Well, and I guess with that whole side of things, yes, I don't want to put all the blame on Chris McIntosh, but when you have Big Cat, Dan Katz from Barstool, coming out on his podcast, Pardon My Take, saying, hey, I tried multiple times to give money to Wisconsin, and they just weren't taking my money. And then Frank Kaminsky quote tweets that and says, hey, I was trying to give money too. Yeah. They weren't taking my money. But then we're hearing that he's groveling to the government essentially to get $14.2 million brought into the system when he had other people willing to give money too. So I guess I'm with you guys where I'm not mad at Chris McIntosh, I guess. It just raises a whole lot of questions for me about what the Badgers are going to do now, what was happening when these past couple of months when he was going to the government. Was he already in talks with the Big Ten? And was this like a test from the Big Ten to see if he can go and get that money for them? And then now moving into that Big Ten role, yes, he's not with the day-to-day NIL and transfer portal stuff anymore, but with the Big Ten and SEC talking about potentially leaving the NCAA, and then how do you run the overall NIL and transfer portal type of rules when it comes to that and all these bigger decisions that I think could potentially tank his career if he does it wrong.
Oh, absolutely. And Dan, here's where I would push back a little bit when you said a better job with the NCAA. I don't know if it's better or lateral, whatever the case may be, but to me, the job being offered by the Big Ten was a way out for Chris McIntosh.
Absolutely.
Because in my heart of hearts, I don't have anything, I can put the aluminum foil cap on right now. This is my conspiracy theory take, but I just felt like, or feel as if he doesn't think the football program has the ability to turn it around next year. And if they don't turn it around, if they don't get to a bowl game next year, I think Luke Fickell is already called U-Haul to get the trucks lined up to move out. And if Luke Fickell was going to get moved out, so is Chris McIntosh. So what I'm going to do is take a job with the Big Ten and not put myself in that situation, because I don't have faith at this moment. Again, I'm speaking only for me with the aluminum cap on, that this team has the ability to turn it around, and therefore I'm going to exit stage left.
Well, my response to that is that Chris McIntosh was going to get a job somewhere if he did get fired, right? I think Chris McIntosh, if you look at, what's a better job and what's not a better job, that's all a matter of personal perspective. And I think if I'm in that role, and just every day you're dealing with a coach, or you're dealing with an agent, or you're dealing with some kind of thing where you're trying to find out where the money's going to come from, where it goes. And now there are reports that Greg Gard has been, upset with the way the money is being dispersed. Sure. And they don't have the money to pull in the athletes that they want to pull into, right? And Chris McIntosh, and I don't know on the day-to-day how much he has to do with that, but I will say, if you're McIntosh, you're like, well, we've got to fix the engine first before we can fix the tires, the radio, whatever you want to do. We got to get this right. And because prior to that, the new law that came in, he was referencing the possibility of closing programs and doing that. So I think I'll leave it up to Chris McIntosh to decide whether or not it's a better job. I'm going to assume that for him it is. Okay. Because again, and I'll just say, on a day-to-day basis, Charlie, you're right, that in the idea that, they still may have to deal with this stuff on a Big Ten level as they get into kind of this meta conversation, what these two conferences are going to do. At the same time, he doesn't have to, he's not, he will. Wow, this is great radio.
You're doing great, Dan.
He doesn't have to have the coaches. He doesn't have to have the agents. He doesn't have to have the players. He doesn't have the parents in his office. What are you going to do for my kid?
Yeah.
He doesn't have to have someone say, hey, how are you setting up my kid with an NIL opportunity? That's not his. He's going to be looking at a much bigger element. And then hopefully, if he's doing it right, he's going to be putting that on a director, on some other people to actually activate these ideas. So I do think it's a better job, and may not be as much money. I don't know, but at the same time, I think, is he going to get a little bit of his life back? Yeah, I think he is.
See, I don't think so.
Yeah,
I don't think so. I think the questions that exist right now within the realm of college sports, and especially if the Big Ten and the SEC want to vacate, I think the sleepless nights continue in a different fashion, but I still think they're there, because now the picture has, as you said, has escalated. We've gotten to
Yeah.
the metaverse, right? But let me pivot off of that and talk about the metaverse within Madison, because now Madison has an opportunity, Dan, to align some things.
Mhm.
We've
Right.
got a chancellor that's leaving, a president that's been fired, and an AD that is gone.
Mhm.
And Charlie, I said this yesterday when we spoke, the fact that think back to when you had Donna Shalala, Pat Richter, Barry Alvarez.
Right.
You had a linear line connecting the dots, all lockstepped in how they wanted the athletic programs to be, success. Everybody understood the importance. And I never got the idea that under Mnuchin as the chancellor, that she bought into how athletics play as far as Wisconsin goes. She's academia. She's straight academics. And that's why she's going to end up at Columbia and I think do a marvelous job. It didn't work at Wisconsin. So now you've got a board of regents who have to sit back and figure out all of these pieces. And they have a chance, really, Dan, to set this university up for success moving forward by making sure everybody at the top understands what is about to happen as far as these hires go. Because let's face it, if we can get the president and the chancellor in check, you get the AD. And I don't know who that is. We can talk about who we think the next AD might be. But the next AD is all about two things: HR, fundraising. You do those two things. What did Barry Alvarez do once he got into the athletic department role as AD? He was great at raising funds, and he was great at putting the right people in the right spots. Maybe not so much with hockey during his tenure, but he put people in the right spots, and that's what an AD does.
What? Wow, and just solid.
Sorry, I got to get off my soapbox.
No,
all of a sudden on screen, I got much shorter. I was
let's take a step back in the Wayback Machine. Look at that. So when things changed for Wisconsin back in the early 90s, it started with Shalala.
Right.
Shalala understood it, then got Richter. Richter got Alvarez, right? And we kind of saw the same thing kind of in a weird way with the Green Bay Packers. They got the very top of their organization right before everything kind of fell into place, okay? Now, here's the challenge with that is that what's going to happen first? We can't wait for Wisconsin to hire a new chancellor. We can't wait for them to get a new president. It won't go in that linear order.
Really?
I don't think it's going to.
And that's where I would push back. And I think that's exactly the direction it has to go.
It has to, but will it?
Okay.
That's my question. I think that the intention and all the attention and all the focus is going to be on this athletic department vacancy, which could take a year. They're still looking for a chancellor. They're still looking for these other elements, which could take just as long. Ultimately, you're probably going to have one person that might sign off on these things, but they're really not going to have their hands in who do we pick. So I think you're going to have it's very feasible that you could have in 6 months a new athletic director. Just when you're getting in a new chancellor, just when you're getting these things, you're not going to have the vision of a new chancellor saying, hey, we have, like you said, these things have to be aligned. Now, could it happen? Yes. But even if it does, I think it's going to be much more difficult to go in this linear route than it was back in 1989, 1990. And that's why, you were talking about, I don't want to pick anybody from the SEC as an athletic director. That's exactly where I want to go.
No. I'm not saying not to pick.
Right.
What I'm saying is don't equate it, because the SEC has been doing it for so long.
That's
it's
where I
just
wanna
been
go.
in parking tickets and McDonald's bags.
Yeah.
Not that it was above the table.
Right.
I'm not saying not to even look at. You look at everybody from the SEC to the Pac-12 to whatever Power 5 conference. It makes no difference to me where you look. All I was saying is the fact that they've had a jump start, and I was equating their jump start to where the Badgers have lagged a little bit. So yeah, by no means am I saying do not look at the SEC. They've been doing it as long as anybody.
Yes.
and probably have an upper hand, so to speak, in how this all works. Charlie, I put you in charge right now at this moment. Charlie Usen, who are you picking as AD?
That's really tough. I mean,
that's not the answer.
I think, and this is why it's going to take 6 months to find this person at this point. I kind of agree. It kind of has to be somebody from the SEC, somebody who understands this era of college sports right now. And I guess I have a question for you guys, kind of back on this with Barry Alvarez and his influence that he still has on the University of Wisconsin, and the way he's kind of talked about Chris McIntosh since he's stepped down from this role too. It's kind of different than what we thought he had this opinion during the time that Chris McIntosh was the AD. But we also talk about you need to get the system kind of back in place of going back to where you have this line of people in charge that are just going and reporting to each other. But at the same time, we also said before that his style is antiquated, and what they're doing right now is 5 years behind every other team. How much of an influence is he going to have moving forward? Is this better or worse for him that Chris McIntosh and the chancellor and all these people are leaving the school? Because are they going to go back to them, or are they going to ignore him and move on from him?
I don't think you ever ignore
Barry. You didn't put Barry in a corner.
Yeah,
No.
Barry doesn't go in a corner.
Yeah.
However, I think, and agree to disagree, if you will, Professor, I think his level of influence in today's world of college athletics is diminished a bit. I think you go to Barry Alvarez if you want to talk football. I think he understands the game. The game is still the game, right? But the game around it, as far as the administration goes, has changed dramatically. And that, to me, is where I think Barry Alvarez's influence, I don't want to call it diminished, but it has lessened.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, where you want his blessing. He's the Godfather.
Yes.
Okay. You want his blessing, and you want him to like this new candidate for his leadership style, leadership ability. Like Barry is convinced that this person can do it. But in terms of the strategy, the tactics that are going to be used, the day-to-day stuff, that's probably not where you're going. And that's why if I had my pick, what I would want to do is I'd want to make a list of all the associate ADs that are in power conferences that have clearly had an influence on their university athletics program in terms of NIL, and they're embracing it. They're doing well. These are, men and women. There might be a list of maybe of all these programs, maybe 5 or 10, maybe 10. I doubt it. Where you go, yeah, you guys you're doing really well athletically. You're managing a new NIL reality. You're doing all this, and you've been with this program for 5 years. I think you're ready to be the person that calls the shots.
Do you go Power 5? Or are you strictly looking Power 4? Because
4. I'm not sorry. I didn't mean to say 5.
No.
Yeah.
I'm
numbers are hard, Charlie.
It's still early. It's still early.
I'm
We're getting through it.
of the mindset. I would look at Power 5. I'd look at, let's say, like a James Madison, who's figured out how to negotiate all of these landmines that it is now college athletics.
I disagree.
And had the ability to be successful. How dare you?
How
dare you disagree? You know what? Let's take a break.
Yeah.
Dan and I are having it out in the parking lot.
More cleaning here. Okay. You don't know what I mean. Just wait for the tweet.
So we'll get to a break. We'll do some headlines. I have a feeling that this is going to get pushed back somehow into hour number 2 to try and work our way through this. And we'll do it next. It's College Sports Weekly, live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios, powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook. All right, welcome back in. It's College Sports Weekly, live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios. We are powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook. I'm going to throw this out. Talk and text line, 414-677-1250. Text us favorite movies where you can grab a clip from, because during the break, we've decided that next week we will do away with music as our bumper coming out of break. I mean, I don't know how we do headlines without having headlines play, but maybe we can find something.
We can pick up something for Anchorman, I'm sure.
Yes,
Yeah.
there you
There you
go.
go.
Absolutely.
It's just going to end up being a bunch of Will Ferrell clips.
Yeah.
So favorite movie clips, if you got any, hit us up again on the talk and text line, 414-677-1250. And then I think the week after, Dan, what has been one of the most successful times where we had, we'll say, fan interaction is when we came
It was
up
not
with,
about sports.
It was not about sports. It was about people's favorite cartoons. So maybe the week after we do favorite cartoons
Look at our
again.
shtick.
We got shtick. Oh,
Yeah.
That's what happens when
That's-
you inhale all the dust
Yeah,
that I've been
exactly.
inhaling.
Which, by the way, if
Cleaning-
anybody wants to see what we do during commercials, I just posted it.
I was
Yeah,
talking to Sparky,
at Dan
we need,
Underberg.
we need like a Patreon or something
Yeah.
for the station just for like the in-betweens.
Yeah.
It'd be perfect.
So you'll see Don dusting.
Yes.
It was
Well,
impressive.
Thank you. Thank you. We're gonna clean this place up before we walk out of here at 11 o'clock and do our post-show rituals that we tend to do. But let's get to some headlines first, because that's what the music said we were about to do. And Sharon Moore, Dan,
Yeah.
the now former head coach at the University of Michigan, got a slap on the wrist,
Mhm.
got some probation,
Mhm.
and now is free to, I guess, continue his life in whatever fashion that might be. I
Right.
have no idea, but I think if you are in and around the Michigan athletic department, you're happy that this has been
Absolutely.
adjudicated,
Yeah.
put
Mhm.
to bed,
Yep.
and now we can move on.
You
from
did
it.
not. You did not want this to move on any longer than it had to. You
Right.
want to focus on your new head coach of the football team. You want to kind of right that ship. It was an ugly episode, but it was also, in terms of the sports sphere,
Yeah.
it was very short lived. I mean, you thought
Yeah.
that this would last longer, and it kind of had its week, maybe a little bit longer, and then that was it. So I think Michigan does what Michigan does. It walks away from this again, and not blaming the university for
No,
this.
no.
That's not what I'm doing. But it seems like, if there's anything, did they invent Teflon at the University of Michigan? Because it just nothing really sticks.
And isn't it interesting that it didn't stick the
Mhm.
way I think many of us anticipated?
Right.
But this Rossini Vrabel thing continues to go on week after week. The Rossini Vrabel thing has got more legs, so to speak, than what the Sharon Moore story had last year. And now one more thing to get to before we get to the top of the hour and get to another break. Unfortunately, Dick Vitale once again diagnosed with cancer.
Yeah.
So our hearts and prayers go out to Dickie V, who, if anybody kind of fell in love with college basketball in his heyday, like I did,
Mhm.
the fact that the man still has to keep battling the way he is, and he's a battler. So we hope to hear at some point that all is well in Dickie V land. So good luck to him. All right. Top of the hour coming up. When we come back, I have a feeling we're going to continue the athletic department discussion that we were having prior with regards to Wisconsin. Also talk about the transfer portal, because Wisconsin, obviously Marquette, others have been active in it. It's College Sports Weekly, live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios. We are powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook.
basketball, football, baseball. From Division I to Division III, it's time for College Sports Weekly with Dom Macholis and Dan Underberg on the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network.
All right, welcome back in. It's College Sports Weekly, live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios, powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook. Don Wachilis, along with the Professor Dan Underberg, Charlie Usen on the ones and twos, as we've got 60 minutes remaining on this fine Saturday to make our way through some of the storylines right now within the world of college athletics. And Dan, I'm going to jump back to where we were before, getting back to the whole Wisconsin AD thing that's taking place. So I think you and I'll say, disagree in the path that it will take. I think your path is probably the more practical one, but I just hope whatever path it goes down, that again, it's linear, where everybody understands the importance of making sure that the Wisconsin Badgers in today's day and age are relevant, especially when it comes to football, because as you were saying prior to us going to break, when Chris McIntosh kind of let it be known that maybe some sports would go by the wayside, sports will go by the wayside if we don't get this football thing turned around and start generating revenue the way we have over the past 5 to 10 years. Yeah,
if you look at the way that even the stadium has been redesigned to be, again, more revenue production coming out of the football experience, the in-stadium football experience. And then you look at the stadium and there ain't nobody there, it was pretty quiet. We were up there. We saw what was going on, especially near the field house, where they have a lot of and designed event space and just kind of that primary space they want to fill. And, it wasn't. It wasn't full. And obviously you could look around the stadium, you could see the challenges there. Now, Wisconsin got better as the season went on. They upset a couple top 25 teams, which is outstanding. But I mean, the name of the game for the athletic department is butts and seats. Right. That's just it. And so again, when Chris McIntosh is going to be criticized, it's going to be criticized for the state of the football program. And this next person has to come in and have a clear path and a clear vision for how they're going to do that.
And that going back again to the late 80s, early 90s, when Pat Richter got into the fold there as AD, he inherited a $2.1 million deficit when he stepped quaint in today's world.
I mean, we've got athletes making that kind of money right now.
Your quarterback is making what the deficit was back then, but when he walked through the door and was able to then right the ship and get it moving in the right direction, I need President, Chancellor, AD to be in lockstep in making this thing work in today's day and age. So, Charlie, I'm going to start with you. If there was one individual, you were the genie, you can open it up. You don't even if you've got a realm of people like, I would look here, there, who would you go after to be the next AD? Would it be, let me ask it this way, would it be a Wisconsin guy, or are you looking outside?
I think you kind of have to look outside. I think you have to go outside of what you've been doing. I think Chris McIntosh, being that former football player from Wisconsin, like that helps kind of sell what they were trying to do with Wisconsin football, with Wisconsin athletics. At the same time, I think it also set these certain expectations that were just going to be impossible to meet with the era of NIL coming in the moment he got hired. And when you have such high expectations for a guy that should know the program, should know the school, should know all of these things, and then it just kind of feels like he's falling flat on that, I think that leads to more pressure on his shoulders then, which I don't think you want moving forward here. I think, yes, you want to be able to fundraise. You want to be able to go out there and get people to come in and then sponsor this team and be a part of the school and part of the athletic program. But at the same time, I think you want to do it with somebody who is starting fresh along with this program and along with the school as they kind of start fresh here with this new trend of getting the $14.2 million. Luke Fickell's actually recruiting better than it ever felt like he could from the first 3 seasons with Wisconsin. I think you want somebody who is going to encourage that, but at the same time doesn't come in with those same high expectations. So when we talk about like the mid-major schools that could potentially, like we were saying, like High Point University, you could head over there. They had $5 million in NIL this year, which for the basketball team, which is more than what the Badgers were spending
Right.
at that point. I think my only problem with that is that's different. It's a private university. You're looking at other private universities where it's a lot easier to get that funding than through these public universities, as we saw through, again, groveling to the government to get that $14.2 million. So as much as I think that person could get money, it's just a different atmosphere. So I think at the same time, too, on the SEC side of things, when you go the complete exact opposite, you're going to see guys that are willing to jump ship a lot faster. And you may not find people that are willing to stick around as long if they feel like things are going downhill. So I think you need a nice in between to kind of say, hey, I need somebody who understands what we're doing in the Big Ten just first, but also isn't completely out there that would be a gamble that big. I think you need to stay in the Big Ten and find somebody within the Big Ten that's going to be able to transition to this school who knows the atmosphere already.
So, Dan, a couple of names like Wisconsin guys that have been thrown out are the Troy Vincents, Michael Finleys of the world, who have had success in other sporting realms. I'll say it that way. On the business side, I don't know if, again, as Charlie just eloquently stated, I don't know if I necessarily want that added pressure of a Wisconsin guy coming in and having to deal with the pressures now that are in that position moving forward. But yet you look at a Vincent, you look at a Finley, they've got the acumen, I think, to do the job. To me, if you could somehow clone a Mark Murphy, who's not coming back into the college ranks, who experienced life, at Northwestern, and then what he did in Green Bay, I think understands the business realm. Somebody with that kind of acumen is who I would love to see. But again, I don't know if we need to stay within the family or go outside the family. I wish I had really a good Godfather imitation about kissing the ring and staying within the family, but I'm not even going to try. So I'm going to pass it over.
We'll play the clip next week.
Yeah, there you go. I think when we look at what Wisconsin has done from an athletic department realm, it's had a ton of stability for decades. It's been able to claim that since 1990. And that stability started with Pat Richter. And Pat Richter, while he was a Wisconsin guy, was not within the Wisconsin athletic department. I think he was with Oscar Mayer.
He was
think
upper management there.
So what effectively they did is they found someone that was familiar with the athletic department, familiar with the culture of Wisconsin, but they found leadership, right? And they found the person that could make difficult decisions. Remember, it was Richter that decided that they had to cut sports in I think it was late 80s in order to kind of right the ship. That's why we don't have baseball anymore.
Right.
And doing that. So I am not, look, when I talk about reaching out, and Charlie, I agree with you, Big Ten would be great, finding someone, an Ohio State guy, Michigan guy, someone that has those kind of backgrounds and understands it would be fantastic. So when I say looking at the SEC, looking at the Big Ten, looking at the Power Four, see, I can do numbers now.
There you go.
It's with the ideas that they understand, they come into this knowing what it is they're getting into bed with, right? That this is the reality of this particular industry. However, if you can find someone that can step in that has the leadership acumen to make the difficult choices, whether that be coaching, whether that be, cuts, whatever that is, but can do that and traverse what NIL is and what the portal is, then maybe you look at that way. So I have read that whatever Wisconsin has to do, they've got to cast a wide net. Yeah. I agree with that. I think, but the challenge is you don't have a Shalala making like the ultimate decision right now. It's going to be, and this is the worst part about it for me, it's going to be selection by committee.
Yeah.
And not that there wasn't a committee when Richter was out there, but I'm just saying there was a vision put forward by your chancellor. This is what we need. This is what I want to do. And now, do we have that if this is a committee-driven idea for an athletic department?
So going back then, that to me is why we have to go top down. Can we do a top dog?
No,
right?
Yes, you can.
I'm sorry.
Yes, you can.
But this is why I think we need to go top down. This is why I think the president needs to be put in place. The chancellor needs to be put in place. And we live with the interim athletic director in the short term until those two positions are filled, so that, to your point, those things are all lined up and they coincide with one another. I get the importance of having the AD. Dan's ready to jump in. I get the importance of the AD.
I'm just mouth breathing.
But if we go in reverse order and somehow everybody is not in lockstep, then we're right back to where we were the last couple of years.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I hear you.
Are you listening, Dan? That's what I want to know.
What I'm saying is that if we go in that lockstep,
yeah,
my fear is to get to that point of an athletic director is going to take longer than Wisconsin may have the patience for, longer than we have the ability to support before things really start falling off the edge. Look, and Charlie, help me out. Who's the GM that's the interim AD right now, or will be? The football GM, and I'm blank. He is going to be the interim AD, right? Mm-hmm. So, my point being is that
Marcus Sedbury.
Thank you. Is that what we want for an extended period of time?
If it means in the long term we are better prepared.
How long are you willing to go?
To me, this doesn't take more than a year. I think the president and the chancellor are put in play within the next 6 to 7 months.
Okay.
And so if they're in play within the next 6 to 7 months, then the next move, here you go.
I agree with that. Hopefully that's possible.
Okay.
The point is that what can happen within an athletic department, what can happen with a football program within one season could be devastating. So Wisconsin's right at that precipice right now. In fact, I can almost make the argument that where Wisconsin football program right now is on the downward slope, and they're trying to get their grip on glass as they're trying to get back up to the top.
Sure.
If it goes for another season where it ends poorly.
Okay. But let me interrupt. How quickly do you think they can put an AD in place to prevent the sliding on glass? Because I agree with you. I think they're hanging on for dear life with whatever they can do. But I don't see an AD being put into play, let's say by June or July, when they're going to have any sort of impact as to how the football program
what
will
I'm
be
trying
next
to
year.
avoid. Mom and Dad are fighting.
Cover my ears, cover my eyes, go to my room.
What I'm trying to avoid is this idea of, okay, we get the new chancellor in. I'm just going to stick with the chancellor, not the president of the system.
Sure.
The chancellor. We get the new chancellor in, and this chancellor says, I need to be involved. This is a significant decision.
Right.
So we need to extend an interim position for effectively 2 years before a person can come in, because this chancellor hypothetically wants to be 100% vested in the search and wants to put out there and be involved with that. Well, if it takes 6 to 7 months to get the chancellor, okay, it could take another 6 to 7 months to get the AD. Now, that's 12 to 14. Got math again, right? What I'm saying is that there's going to be another year of what the hell are we doing at Wisconsin, and that 1 year could make
But we've already had difference. 3 years of what the hell are we doing?
Yeah, but but we're only talking about it now. The first 2 years is we're giving everybody a pass. So I hope it's going to work out. We're going to change it. We're going to change it. An offensive coordinator. We're going to do all these different things, and it hasn't worked. And now, even though we should have been talking about this 3 years ago, now we're here. And what I'm fearful of is that, because if we have to have everything linear, and in a perfect world, that's great. That would be the best way to do it. I'm not arguing that. But if we have to go linearly, chancellor first, and then so on and so on, this might extend further, which is going to put Wisconsin in a deeper hole, I think. So all I'm saying is that if we find the right person, we got to bring him or her on. But there are some risks to that.
Well, and that's what, Charlie, I'm trying to avoid. I get it. There's risks no matter who we bring in. But if the person we bring in, we think is a solid AD, but for whatever reason, the chancellor and AD can't figure out how to work together, now you've created another situation where the AD might say, you know what, this isn't in alignment with what I want to do.
I'm going to go work for the Big Ten.
I'm out. Yeah, I'm going to go work for the Big Ten, much like we've seen Chris McIntosh do. And then what Dan is fearful of, I think, happens all over again, that we find ourselves deeper into a hole because we didn't do it right at the beginning.
Right. Who do you love most, Charlie?
I love you guys equally. I'm sorry. Whoever gives me more hats. I think I look
Excuse me, I'm on Amazon right now.
I think I look at this situation like you guys talk about the sliding on glass. I guess like in my mind, how quickly, yes, people were mad about the way the football season ended this year and that it wasn't up to par of what we've seen over the course of the past 3 years. But every year as well, when we get to the end of that football season, people are angry and then they get happy about basketball and they get happy about volleyball.
And then March
hockey.
comes.
And then March comes. And yes,
angry
we get upset about that. But I'm saying like these fans are able to move on quicker because we have other sports at Wisconsin that are also still competing at a high level. So as much as they are sliding on that glass, I think there's footholds that they're catching every once in a while that's slowing this process down a little bit, that is allowing the fan base to kind of reset every single year. And because of that, I think you do have the time to go top down, like Don is saying, and say, hey, we can take this time to kind of reset a little bit. Yes, people are going to be mad about football, but Luke Fickell's doing a really good job recruiting right now. He's holding water. We have women's basketball getting the #1 recruit in the transfer.
Buy you a better hat. So,
no, here to Charlie's point though, where I think this thing, and I get it, as fans, we're very come see, come si, right? And I think Charlie makes a good point. We get frustrated with football. We fuss and moan. It was terrible. We didn't get to the Mayo Bowl, whatever the case may be. And then basketball starts, and then we're happy again.
We're fun.
Okay. Where this is really going to play out is, you brought it up before, when Pat Richter had to come in and cancel baseball and cancel some of these other sports. If we've got to start eliminating sports within the university because financially the football program is a mess, that's where I think the legs come into. And I think that's where the fan base doesn't necessarily move on the way they have the last couple of years, because again, the revenue isn't being generated. And when it's not being generated, the entire athletic department.
And when we think of fans, we're thinking about the guys in this room, right? That's how we're kind of defining that. Where an athletic director is going to define fans, and additionally is going to be donors.
Yeah. And
are the donors going to be engaged, kind of a thing? And do the donors care about who the chancellor is, kind of a thing? So I'm just saying that we're right now, for example, I've been hearing, and I've been fighting this for quite a while, that there's going to be this donor fatigue. Okay, when does it start? I've been hearing about how, money's it's going to get too expensive to do all this stuff in sports, watch it, play it, do whatever it is. And we're going to cost people right out of the game. Well, has it happened yet? It happened. So now we're waiting for donor fatigue, and it hasn't happened. So what we're seeing at Wisconsin, I believe, is a lack of trust. Okay. People aren't giving the way Wisconsin would like them to give. And you brought up Kaminsky, and you brought up other people that have not been able to give and wanted to, right? But I think there's a big element of donor trust that, I'm not going to donate until I know you guys know what you're doing. There are too many holes that need to be plugged.
Absolutely agree with what you're saying. But how do you develop the if you're not sure? It's like, okay, if we go into a corporation, the military, whatever the case may be, if you're not sure what's happening at the top,
right,
how does everybody else then fall into play? You start doing your own thing, and that's where the trust erodes.
I don't think the donors, the guys that are really giving money into the athletic department, care about the academic side of the university.
It's not even about caring about the academic side, but it's making sure at least that the chancellor understands the importance of the athletic program. That the whole chancellor side and the academics, that's a whole separate issue. But we have a chancellor who's getting ready to leave that I don't think embraced athletics to the degree it needs to be at Wisconsin. And because of that lack of embracing, we've got ourselves a situation.
We've got the situation. All I'm saying is if we risk losing more wallets, like sizable wallets that we can't really,
like Charlie's wallet,
wallet,
yes,
things that we can't really understand, right? We don't live in that world. That's going to make it more difficult. Time goes on. Again, if we can get this stuff aligned, fantastic, right? But I don't think we can look at it as fans, or however you want to define that, where the landscape of college athletics was, you get your recruits in, they stick around for 4 or 5 years, and you've got automatic time to build. Ask yourself this: Barry Alvarez was under 500 for the first 3 years at Wisconsin before they ended up going to the Rose Bowl. In today's climate, would he have stuck around? I mean, would he have been asked to stick around? Right?
It would all
rose-colored
depend.
glasses.
Yeah, but it would all depend upon what Barry Alvarez was doing. Like, if Barry Alvarez had the ability to go in the transfer portal and fill voids and still wrap a fence around the state the way he did, yeah, he's there. If he takes the approach of, no, I'm going to go here, I'm going to go there, much like we've seen under Fickell's tenure the first couple of years. I mean, finally, Luke Fickell has decided to put a fence around the state.
But it's only because the talent's good this year. Like, next year, if the talent isn't as good, is he still going to have that same fence put up?
But there was always talent, I think, within the state that got away. Maybe not to the quantity that we have this year, but there was always talent that went to Notre Dame and Minnesota and Ohio State that were leaving our fair confines, where you heard the stories where, like, I wasn't even contacted. And these guys are 4- and 5-star recruits, where I think now I get your point, Charlie, that we've got a greater quantity of them. So now you go ahead and look within. But even from a PR perspective, you want to have Luke Fickell sitting on your doorstep, knocking on the door, trying to get you to come to the home school. Now, if you choose to go elsewhere, that's fine, but at least the effort was there. And from a PR perspective, I don't know if we ever had the PR portion of it where he was knocking on those doors, which I think set him back. So to circle back to Alvarez over there, Professor, I think he does stay because I think he would have the ability to adjust in today's world.
I wonder about that, because we're talking about how he was able to, and again, he did that very intentionally, build a wall around the state, get Wisconsin's recruits first. And that was fantastic in 1990. Okay. Now, if you take that same strategy, okay, and put it in today's, the date today, but the difference is that if you go back and say, okay, I'm going to put a wall around Wisconsin and it's NIL, and it's far more transactional. Someone can say, yeah, Coach, I love what you're saying. I'd love to stay at Wisconsin, but they're going to pay me 2 more zeros more to pay there. And it's my word, transactional, right? It's where I think it's an apples and oranges comparison a little bit to be able to do that. And look at, I think there are going to be challenges. So,
We've got him frustrated, Charlie.
No, I'm fine. I can do this all day. Okay. What I'm looking at is a far more complex issue.
Absolutely.
And than anything that Barry Alvarez and Pat Richter had to deal with. And when we look at it in today's terms, that leadership that we need, I just think we have a shorter window for success than maybe Barry had going into it. And I would argue that if Barry Alvarez was coming in NIL and had, at that time, I think it was 1-11, 3 and something, and then they went big, right? I think at that point, you'd have been talking about a hot seat after year 2. And then he doesn't win again, and I think he would have been out. I really do.
Which goes to my point. We've got to start at the top, make this thing work,
so
that
we
don't get into that situation.
We may not have that time. I think that it's the time construct that we're looking at. It's the idea that, okay, let's get this right over the course of a year and a half. Let's do that right. Okay, I get it, but I think that makes the rebuilding process even more difficult than a lot of people have the patience for, and that the athletic department can't afford. So there's an issue there.
Speaking of time and patience, Charlie's got no time and patience. We got to get to a break. He's over there. He's going to break a wrist telling us we've got to take a timeout. We are going to get to transfer portal news.
Oh, there's nothing to argue about that.
On the other side of the break, because Wisconsin, UWM had a nice signing this week. We'll get to that. Been promising it since 9:00. We might get to it by 10:30, but we'll see as the conversation continues. We'll get to a break. It's College Sports Weekly, live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios. We're powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook. All right, welcome back in. College Sports Weekly live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios. As always, we are powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook. You can hit us up on the Nicolay Law Talk and text line 414-677-1250 or find us on all our socials at Wisconsin Sports Radio. So let's finally get to what we had originally wanted to talk about, Dan, a few segments ago, but the Badgers have found themselves another player within the transfer portal. And you know what's funny to me, and I get Marquette made that big splash, and thanks to Ben Steele again for joining us at the top of the show this week in talking about how Marquette has now dabbled into the portal and how they're going to go about it. I have a feeling, based on what Ben was saying, I think Shaka's approach is a little bit like what Greg Gard is doing in Madison, where you're still recruiting and developing and then adding the pieces, as opposed to a John Calipari or our friend out there at St. John's, who's just like, you know, I don't look at high school kids anymore. Just give me the 22-year-olds and I'll see what I can do. But this week, Wisconsin landed Trey Autry, a kid who's got 1 year remaining out of George Washington. Good numbers. And I think it was a position, obviously, of need after Nick Boyd finished up his time at Wisconsin. I have faith in Gard. I mean, you know, when people are like, well, what did you think about the pickup? My initial reaction is always, without even looking at stats, I'm like, okay, good. Because what Gard has done in the past with Tanji and Nick Boyd in filling those spots, especially now this upcoming week. I think this is where Gard does his best work, is in week 2 of the transfer portal. Everybody's talking about Louisville and how they landed the center out of Kansas and the guard out of Oregon and what, y'all, just they've got the recruiting class now number 1 as far as the transfer portal goes. Okay, that's great. As a coach, are you able to mix all of that together? Because I look at Kansas last year, a lot of talent, personality-wise, on the court, off the court, however it worked, it didn't meld for Coach Self. So now Gard, I always think, does his best work in week 2. I think, according to what Ben was leading on, so will Shaka here in this upcoming week. But again, a great get for Gard and Trey Autry. I want to see what Gard follows it up with here with 1 more week remaining in the transfer portal.
Yeah, it will be interesting. It's this week popping up is going to be very, very just nationally in terms of where people are going to go. You think of a guy like John Blackwell and all that. So what I like is Greg Gard's history of taking people from mid-major programs that are ready to make the jump.
Yes.
And be successful in his system. And I'm hopeful that this is going to be kind of the same thing. There are no guarantees, right? We can't always assume that it's going to work out. Yeah, he's been very fortunate for 3 years in a row to get this thing to work. And I'm hoping it'll be year 4 for him. But yeah, Wisconsin is also picking up an international player, kind of like a transfer portal. Not really. You hope that that's going to work out. And what guys is he going to pick up that might be able to supplement the bench a little bit? It'll be interesting. And I hope that whatever it is, it's the same kind of mindset mentality of the group, that they're going to work with each other to put it together in that second half of the season. I think if anything we can expect that college basketball has taught us is that it's not about, you know, the international trips you take once you get your team together. It's not just about the offseason conditioning. It's not about all that stuff. It's really in-game shots fired experience. It's going to bring you together. And it takes a couple months for that to happen before they actually function as the unit that you want. And I think hopefully as Wisconsin fans, if this can continue to move forward, we've kind of learned we've got to give them through December to be able to be a successful team.
Oh, absolutely. It takes that long at least for everything to come together. Charlie, really happy Austin Rapp decided to come back. I thought that was a big component. I had some people ask me, tell me, whatever the conversation, how you want to phrase it, talking about Nolan Winter, a little bit surprised. But I'll go back to when we were talking with Ben Steele. There is a push right now for centers because of what took place with Michigan, Illinois, Arizona, and the list goes on as far as the 5 spot. You got somebody like Nolan Winter, who my fingers are crossed will come back, because you put him and Austin Rapp. You've got some cornerstone pieces now in which to build around. but I can't fault Nolan Winter for not signing the deal yet with the Badgers when right now the most overpaid position by those in the national media who cover the transfer portal is the 5 spot. So I think Nolan Winter's doing his due diligence by saying, I'm not signing anything yet because I have a feeling he's getting offers from other schools that are more significant right now than what the Badgers are offering.
Oh, 100%. I think the number that On3 was speculating was somewhere between like $4 and $6 million for most of these centers in the transfer portal. You can't ignore that. And if Wisconsin's only going to offer you $4 million because they're going to 3 other guys that they need to offer, the $3 to $5 million that were in there for wings, or the $2 to $4 million that was getting offered for guards in the transfer portal, like you have to be able to look around. At the same time, Nolan Winter seems pretty open about wanting to stay at Wisconsin, despite going into the portal and looking at his other options. He seems like he wants to be back with Greg Gard with this team and take that next step as a player. So I think he can. I think if the Badgers had him towards the end of the season and into the Big Ten tournament, I don't know. I feel like the team gels a little bit better in that tournament season and is able to maybe make a little bit better of a run, and not just in that first round game when he comes back. And it just feels like he's just not fully there, ready to go for this team. So I think they have that ability. I guess with Greg Gard and the transfer portal and these guys coming in, you get Autry coming in. If Autry doesn't work out, and let's say you lose Nolan Winter, the people that were calling for Greg Gard this at the end of March, this past couple of months, does that get a lot louder if you get through December and Autry isn't taking that next step as Boyd is? Or again, your center position is lacking because you lost out on a Winter and weren't able to keep him in-house. What does the fan base say about a Greg Gard then at that point? Is it going to be a quick change, kind of like we're talking about within the front office, where if you're not getting the job done, how quickly do we move on from you?
Well, Greg Gard has had to deal with that for, let's say, the last decade. I mean, Dan always brings up, the fire guard signs that you see hanging from the dorm windows. I mean, it happens seemingly every year. So to me, as long as, again, you have the kind of regular season that Gard had last year and the year before, and somehow figures out a way to make March a little bit better, I don't necessarily see the hot seat, for instance, for Greg Gard the way I see for Luke Fickell.
Yeah, I think it's and now because of the uncertainty of the athletic director role,
right?
Because I think if there was going to be any heat placed on Greg Gard, it's not what Greg Gard did do or didn't do. It's the idea of, from the athletic director's office, making statements like, we want to compete for national championships. And then, Wisconsin's failures in in the tournament, then that puts actually more pressure on a director to potentially make a change of a regular season, successful coach kind of a thing. With that adjustment that's going on in Madison right now in that department, in that particular office, that probably at least helps Greg Gard in the sense of he's not going to be hearing that same kind of pressure possibly for a season, because they're searching for somebody else.
They want stability.
They want stability.
You want stability in the midst of all of that.
And Fickell's on the hot seat before him.
Yeah,
so you have somebody in front of him that's
he lives
that
there right now.
Exactly.
The surprise to me is the fact that John Blackwell hasn't signed yet. I mean, Sports Illustrated's talking about Illinois, UCLA, and Louisville as kind of the front runners for his services. But Dan, it also goes again to this emphasis on the 5 spot. If this was any other year as the transfer portal has grown, I think John Blackwell would have been one of the first off the board. But now you've got these coaches and GMs all going after that 5 spot, and it leaves somebody like a John Blackwell waiting for week 2. John Blackwell's going to get picked up. There's no question about it. Where he ends up going, maybe there is a bit of a bidding war going on between the 3 teams I mentioned, if not another. But I guess because of the emphasis in that 5 spot, I'm just a little bit surprised that Blackwell hasn't gone in week 1.
I think he's probably being a little more selective too. Like, he's probably got his top 3 candidates and he's waiting to hear what they're going to get. But there's also the idea of what John Blackwell wants to get out of this besides being paid, which is being the guy. And I think that's what he wants, to find a situation where he's going to do that. And so John Blackwell and his camp are probably watching very carefully what these other programs are dabbling in. Are they also looking for another guard? Do they have a junior guard that's coming up that's ready to take the reins? I think he's being very particular about where he wants to go. And so while, yeah, those 3 teams are what everybody's hearing, it's not going to shock me if he ends up going to somewhere else that nobody anticipated,
Right.
because he's going to get the chance to play and get close to the money he wants.
Would that include Wisconsin?
I think it could.
Like, are they
Yeah.
still in on this? What
Yeah,
is
why not? Why not? Why not come back for another year where you know the system, you know the program, you're good with the coach, and if they're willing to pay you a little bit more, now he's probably paying attention again to who they picked up from George Washington. Is this going to be another Nick Boyd situation? I'm not saying that there was any issue between Boyd and Blackwell, but what is he going to be walking into? Because I guarantee you, this new guy has been told, yeah, we need you to do what you do. You're going to be that guy. And where does Blackwell fit into that?
Well, and that to me has been the reasoning behind Blackwell leaving is the fact that Nick Boyd came in last year and kind of took over life, in the latter half of the season. John Tanji did it the year before. And I think Blackwell kept waiting his turn, so to speak, to be the guy in Madison. And every time the transfer portal opened up and Greg Gard went and dabbled in it, he found somebody else to kind of oversee, or that's not the right terminology, but supersede, I guess, what John Blackwell was doing. And I think that was the precipice behind him saying, you know what, it's time to go. I want to go someplace where I can make a name for myself because I'm still trying to get to the next level. And of course, he's dabbling in the transfer portal and the NBA draft at the same time. I don't know how that plays into it. Because let's face it, for somebody like John Blackwell, he's going to make more next year staying in college than he will in his rookie contract in the NBA, which is a whole nother. Ben was talking earlier about 2-hour shows. That's a whole nother 2-hour show that we could have the way things go. Before we get to a break and wrap this thing up with handing out shovels, Amari Hereford, one of the runners up for Mr. Wisconsin as far as basketball goes, ends up signing with Bart Lundy, our guy Bart Lundy over at UWM. He had a scholarship offer with the Badgers, chose UWM. Dan, that's a huge get for our guy there at Panther Arena and UWM. Bart Lundy, great get in getting an in-state kid in Amari Hereford.
Yeah, absolutely. And I got to believe that he's believing he's going to see a lot of playing time right away. And that's the attraction of going to UWM, where, again, you might be buried a little bit more deeply in a bench at Wisconsin than you're used to, than you want. So the opportunity to play at UWM, and this is a case, and I hate to say this, where someone is now thinking, okay, I'm going to get my traction at one spot, and then I'm going to get the what else I want later on. So this is kind of the quid pro quo of getting a great asset to your basketball program, but your basketball program is not Power 4. So hopefully there's a way to maneuver around that for Bart.
And that becomes the issue now with our mid-majors. You land these kids, they're going to be looking to, as you just said, elevate their stature. And then maybe a Wisconsin comes calling again, which I know Bart Lundy's probably throwing something at the radio right now. Stop, enough. I need this kid for 4 years, and we absolutely get, but a great get by UWM getting Amari Hereford. All right, let's get to a break. On the other side of the break, we hand out shovels as we wrap things up here on a Saturday. It's College Sports Weekly live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios. We are powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook.
know what? I want to shovel the funk. I want to shovel the funk. I want to shovel the funk. I feel like shovel the funk. I got to shovel the funk. You want to shovel the funk? Do you want to shovel the funk? Then go ahead. Go.
One last time, it's College Sports Weekly, live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios. We are powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook. We get ready to hand out shovels. Before we do, shout out to UW Whitewater, ranked number 7 in the country right now with their baseball team, and to all the baseball coaches, high school, little league, college, you name it, that's having to negotiate these fine fields after all of these inches of rain in central and southeastern Wisconsin. Bless your hearts, because you've got some scheduling to do here to make some of these things up, and I don't envy what's about to cross your desk right now. With that said, let's hand out some shovels. Charlie, I start with you, my friend.
Let me turn on my mic. That might help. I got sound this week. This is
Here we go.
Badgers linebacker Mason Posa saying he would die for Wisconsin to start winning again. Now that's a football guy right there, man. I love it. I love it.
He is in the forefront of everything that football team does from a PR perspective, because that's the guy you want, right? That's the guy who loves where he's at, regardless of how the three of us yuckleheads can pick apart things with the program. He's ride or die. That's his coach. This is his team. This is his university. Watch us go. Dan.
That's a hard one to beat. That really is. Look, I'm going to keep this simple. I'm going to go Shaka Smart.
Okay.
You jumped into the pool, the NIL pool, and man, you came out with a big fish.
Absolutely.
You did a really nice job for your first stop into that. So yeah, Shaka Smart gets mine this week.
All right, mine is going to go to Bart Lundy in picking up Amari Hereford, kind of for the same reason, but doing it the traditional way and getting a top high school recruit in this city. That was an entertaining, interesting 2 hours we just put in the books. Time for us to get up out of here. My thanks to Ben Steele, Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, for taking some time to join us today. Charlie, well done, sir, on the ones and twos. We appreciate you. To the professor, nice arguing with you for 2 hours. That was all right. All right.
Hey, everybody, don't forget to give us your clips.
Yes, thank you.
Your movie clips. What do you want us to have?
Next week's bumpers are movie clips. Time for us again to get up out of here. It's College Sports Weekly. We're live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios, powered by Potawatomi Sportsbook. We're back in 6 and 22.